that there is this experience that we can have inside of our bodies that affects our world in some way, and our science simply has not allowed for that historically. That the space that we believe is empty is not really so empty. It's full of a living essence, of a living material that we're only beginning to understand, number one. And number two, the fact, and it is a fact now, that we may have experiences inside of our bodies that influence the world beyond our bodies through the conduit of what's in this space. When you just perform that miracle, when you just perform that miraculous healing, what is it that you did inside of your body to make that happen? They were creating an experience, producing an effect inside of their bodies that my science never told me was possible. That there is something that we can do in our lives that influence not only the physical body, ours and those of other people around us, but literally influence the physical reality of our world, and that changes everything. It changes everything. You just blew my mind.
The Sign of One is one of the most confusing and strange factions. Their beliefs can be boiled down to the notion that the individual is the center of the universe. What's the most powerful thing in the entire galaxy? Gods? Organizations? Armies? Institutions? Government? Art? Religion? No. It's thought. It's as simple as that. Thinking, the mere action of cognition from everyday mortal beings, is the most powerful force in the universe. Your thoughts are a mighty act that makes gods, determines the future, and molds the building blocks of reality. Philosophically, the Sign of One can be traced to ancient Hindu and Buddhist concepts of reality. What we call the real world is really just a movie produced by our senses. What we perceive of as real is just a fantasy, an illusion created by your mind. Buddha took this further to suggest that all things are forever in flux, always changing, and objective reality is impossible. Curiously, modern quantum mechanics suggests that the building blocks of matter are also best understood as a process. That is, that they are forever impermanent and shifting. So there is no basic floor or fundament of existence, only ever-shifting realities all around us. The Sign of One took this curious crossroads of modern physics and ancient metaphysics one farther. What if you could become the director or writer of the movie of reality? Maybe there's a force that can shift the particles of matter to your liking, and the Sign of One thinks they've found what can do that. Us. Everyday mortal minds have created everything of power and greatness in the outer planes, haven't they? The gods, the lands they inhabit, everything around us exists because we determine it to be that way. Most factions want to show how to live within reality. The Signers want to alter reality itself to better suit them. The Sign of One began many centuries ago with Rilith. Rilith had a fascination with spiders and spent her days buying, selling, and trading with other arachnophiles. She also liked her spiders alive, not dead, and pinned to a collection board, and that almost led to her death. Rilith was bit by one of the deadliest spiders in existence. Her arm went numb and turned blue, but Rilith did not panic. Instead, she focused every fiber of her being onto the thought that she will not die, and she thought this over and over again. Soon, instead of the characteristic fever and shutting down of her nervous system that spider's bite would usually cause, Rilith was completely fine. She became the only person in existence to ever survive the venom of that particular type of deadly spider. Now, no one was actually there to witness this, and we have only Rilith's word. But the Signers sure believe it happened. After her supposed brush with death, Rilith started sharing her story with anyone who would listen. She claimed that thinking positively had somehow neutralized the poison, and anyone could apply her thinking techniques to any activity they wanted. The idea caught fire and the Sign of One was born, and soon they were trying to make the multiverse a better place by teaching people the virtues of positive thinking. Over time, however, the Sign of One shifted slightly from that. Then they became obsessed with divination and shaping the future through desire. The Signers ran into immediate trouble with the Bleak Cabal. During their conflict, the entire Sign of One announced that they were willing the Bleaker Factol, Nobi, to death. A day after the announcement was made, Nobi was in the dead book. No cause of death was ever determined, and to this day the Signers claim they imagined him to death. And they've been at daggers drawn with each other ever since. Around this time, the Sign of One adopted one of their most powerful beliefs. That they can predict the future, or more accurately, determine the outcome of the future by thinking about what they want to occur. To this day, a major feature of the Sign of One is registering predictions of the future and waiting to see if they come to pass. Those with successful predictions rise through the ranks of the faction. There's nothing written in the Planescape literature about this, but they should get some sort of boost to any spell cast in the divination sphere from my perspective. Predicting the future is all well and good, and there is a divination school in D&D, so somehow this does make sense. But how do the signers cope with being wrong? Doesn't it just seem on the face of it a little bit ludicrous when so often they're not going to be able to know the future about everything? What happens if your leader predicts something and it doesn't come true? They can try to behave like the Oracle at Delphi and make vague pronouncements that could be taken in many ways. But that doesn't seem likely to get you very far in terms of prestige. People want accurate statements about the future. Why would someone listen to another who divines the future and ends up wrong? Unfortunately, this is a commonplace event in the real world, but people don't give up despite their absolute certainty that the apocalypse will occur fails to happen. Perhaps cognitive dissonance, the notion that when something you believe fails, you double down on your belief to avoid the negative emotions of feeling foolish, is really to blame. It may seem strange, but real-world evidence from not a few religions suggests people are excited by and looking for someone who will predict the future, even if they're complete buffoons and never actually realize their promise. People are scared, and it gives them a sense of power and control over the world, whether in Planescape or in the real world that we inhabit, to believe that we can predict what's going to happen in the future.
In the mid-19th century, a Baptist preacher, William Miller, traveled the country preaching that the second coming of Christ was close at hand. Tens of thousands believed he was right. As October 22nd approached, true believers prepared to meet their God. Farmers abandoned their crops and livestock. Shop owners closed their businesses. Others simply threw away their money. But the next morning, Ellen White and the others awoke to a world unchanged.
She believed with her whole heart that Jesus was coming. She writes in her own writings, I went home and I cried all night.
The signers are riven with contradictions. The shapers of reality have a paradoxical need for constant affirmation of their greatness. Paradoxical because for the signers, their worth is derived, as all things are, from themselves. Their inner mind, thoughts, and feelings are the source of reality's present state. And yet the signers constantly clamor for attention from everyone.
Brenda, it's Alice's night. Stop making yourself the center of attention!
Me? I ask you lovely people, am I making myself the center of attention?
Do you always have to hog the spotlight? Can't you let Alice, who's sitting here with me, have one night?
They're the polar opposite of the bleak cabal's lack of interest in what others think. It's no secret that in the modern Western world over the past 10 years, we've seen the growth of significant and vocal groups, I won't name names, demanding that their existence, no matter how unusual, minor, or contrived, be recognized by others. Gone are the days when it was a mark of character to develop individual autonomy and be at peace with yourself despite what others think. Now people must have their identity, life experience, and even beliefs validated by others, no matter what their objective worth really is. Because, as the signers, quantum physicists, and subcontinental philosophers believe, reality cannot exist definably or objectively. It's only an interpretation of fantasy based on your thoughts. Thus, anything, no matter how ludicrous it may appear, becomes real because the mind of the viewer has subjectively declared it so. This has freed the signers from heavy, oppressive notions of truth that would burden the governors or hardheads, but it also shackles them to emotional murkiness. It's never clear if they are comfortable with themselves because who they are is a possibility, not a reality. They're an act in motion, so to satisfy the human ego, a signer must necessarily receive approbation for their fantastic claims. So the sign of one is always grasping with one another in the city to show how clever all their predictions supposedly are. For a signer, if a tree fell in the woods, it would not really make any noise unless someone else heard it. Of course, the sign of one has been caught more than a few times assisting their predictions. That is, hiring assassins to murder someone they willed to die, or perhaps sending negotiators to stop a war they said was going to be declared over. The prestige given to people who are frequently right can easily slip over into hero worship. A signer who seems forever to be correct can become something of a cult leader, especially to a splinter group of signers known as the Will of One. They believe they've found the One, i.e. the person whose thoughts actually control the direction of the universe. They worship him as their omniscient leader and do his bidding. Stopping that megalomaniacal One and his evil cultists from destroying Sigil or the multiverse itself could be a good campaign hook. Solipsism is the notion that only your mind is certain to exist. Your thoughts are the only thing that can be philosophically proven to be real. Everything else could be an illusion. The ultimate in uncertainty would be the notion that not even you are necessarily real. Though most signers and most solipsists do not go to that extreme, and at least admit that they and their own thoughts are real, even if no one else's are actually true. René Descartes is responsible for the most famous philosophical utterance in history: "I think, therefore I am." For centuries, this phrase and its derivative philosophy excited debate about what is real. The radical doubt of Descartes holds that thinking is itself the only thing we can know to exist, because we must think in order to doubt whether we exist. For a signer, the extraordinary power of thought is the only thing proving our reality has been taken to a metaphysical extreme. The ability of thought to prove our existence proves thinking is the ultimate derivation of authority, and can also be used to craft other things just as it declares our own minds real. A signer character could potentially be the source of considerable humor if he believes himself to be the only real person in an adventuring party. David Hume, perhaps based on the then recent publishing of works on Tibetan theology, claimed we can't really witness causation. Our reality is a decision based on reason, not a discovery of what truly is. Hume was largely an empiricist and rejected some of these notions, but his radical skepticism about reality, whatever he intended us to take from it, stands as a signer tenet. Despite their somewhat esoteric origins, the signers are easy for us to recognize in everyday life. The sign of one has a significant amount of power in the real world. Just think of how much the idea of optimism permeates all of American life. The notion that you just have to want it to get it is ubiquitous. Especially in the last 35 years, since the baby boomers began to take charge of the country, the almost new age idea of positive thinking to change yourself took over our minds. It's almost second nature. We pass over it without thinking. During the 19th century, a movement called New Thought swept through some American religious communities. Its basic tenets involved how thinking in the subconscious mind caused good or bad outcomes on the body.
In God's image is imagination. The expanse of his imagination is my imagination too, and I have a right to use that imagination.
It was in the 19th century that there began to be a revolution of consciousness. People became more conscious of the subconscious mind, of the power of their thoughts upon themselves and their environment and the world.
New thought may permeate almost everything because it is a chameleon and it's really compatible with almost anything and everything.
This was a significant influence on the Christian Science movement. The CSM is a Christian religious sect with almost 500,000 members worldwide. Their most well-known tenet is that prayer can cure sickness, thus they avoid all medical treatment. This rather dark aspect of the positive thinking world has led to people, including children, dying from preventable diseases. Much of the self-help literature, a billion-dollar industry, is based on a fatuous simplification of these ideas. Most of the books, speaking tours, life coaches, and the like try to train people to be optimistic and that thinking about your goals is the precursor to success.
And done. There it is, Stewie. 3 hours, 27 minutes, and I got myself one big steaming pile of book. You want to hear it? Oh, definitely. What are you calling it? Wish it, want it, do it. Love it. Thanks. Okay, Chapter 1. Wish it. What are all the things you want most in the world? Use the following blank pages to write down all of your dreams and desires. Oh, brilliant. Make them do the work.
This attitude about reality can lead to entirely positive aspects to your individual life, such as assuming you are responsible for the negative things in your life. A signer is not likely to blame another person for something that goes wrong. It was the signer that didn't visualize it properly. However, this can also lead to a somewhat cavalier attitude towards the suffering of others. It's the flip side to idiots who say that he fought through the cancer hard and beat it, or God singled me out to protect me during the crash. Though they may not be thinking of it at the time, these statements make crass assumptions about people that didn't survive an illness or a plane or car crash. Brutally casting the horror of events as a responsibility of the victim is the mirror image of acceptance of your own personal responsibility. It could be a form of bullying to convince someone that something beyond their control by any logical measure is in fact their own fault.
What did you say? Shirley, I'm not fooling around anymore. The first thing you're going to learn is to have a good attitude. That's the key. Anybody will tell you that. Don't even think about going anywhere. I'm not finished with you.
To everything there is a flip side. The other side of the positive thinking is, of course, negative thinking. If good thinking can lead to positive results, then bad or negative thinking can destroy you. Negative thoughts are defined as bad or pessimistic thoughts about the self, leading to or caused by low self-esteem. Needless to say, a miserable, depressed faction like the Bleak Cabal are about as negative as you can get, and live their lives in direct opposition to the cheery, positive signers. Negative thoughts could also mean thinking evil things about others in order to hurt them. Using your sheer force of will to harm others is a powerful draw to the sign of one for evil characters. The signers get along well with the highly individualistic sensates. Both have an occasionally selfish view of their own importance in the universe. Though it's not mentioned in the Planescape literature, I would suggest the two have serious oppositions in their belief. The signers believe that reality is derived from within and shaped by the man making the decision, typically independent of exterior thought or observation. In fact, the only thing that can be true is within the mind, as everything that is real is an illusion that is in perpetual change, whereas the sensates believe it is the highest goal to seek enlightenment by experiencing as many things as possible. For the signers, how can you know anything from an illusion, especially one that you can change with your own decision and thoughts? Maybe they just don't want to give the signers too many enemies, but it seems like they would be pretty much opposed in the game to me. In a general sense, any law and order faction has a problem with the signers' selfishness, but the brilliant diplomacy of the signers allowed them a powerful place in Sigil's government, especially if they seem like honest brokers compared to the vested interests of order or chaos. A key part of signer philosophy is that all sentient beings have the ability to make the reality of the universe. Thus it would be very hasty indeed to dismiss someone's opinion outright. A true signer knows that a murderous Tenari from the Abyss has just as much importance as a Deva from Mount Celestia. This lends itself naturally to their role as the curators of the Hall of Speakers. The Hall of Speakers is the heart of Sigillian government and the center of the Sign of One. That's where anyone and everyone has the ability to go and speak to the city council. Forswearing objective reality makes the signers patient with everyone's opinion, because who's to say that they are any less right than you are? Despite their arrogance, the Sign of One are extraordinarily tolerant of other views. Denouncing someone else's views would implicitly denounce their own, after all, and ensure the sometimes violent disagreements between factions are quashed or tabled. Without them, it is likely the city government would collapse from infighting. The head speaker is always in the Sign of One, and he admirably allows all, even common people at times, to speak or present legislation. Sigil's government only moves forward from the signers smoothing over disagreements and their persuasion to solve things through debate and voting. Despite being dedicated to hearing all perspectives, the signers have some of the most bitter enemies in the Kriegstans. The Bleak Cabal, for one, loathe the signers. The notion that each sentient being's thoughts shape reality and meaning, is imbued in even matter created by thinking, is outrageous to the Bleakers. The Cabal is certain about the pointlessness of living and hopelessness of affecting the world around you. It's all dark and negative, so dedicating your life to positive thinking to better yourself is ludicrous. The Transcendent Order also have almost diametrically opposed views. The Order sees thinking as the premier distraction to enlightenment, unlike the signers who give it paramount importance as the shaper of the universe. Lastly, perhaps the most unnecessary enemy of the Sign of One is the most likely to openly become violent with them. The signers are arrogant as all hell. You'd have to be if you thought you were the center of the universe. They're also convinced that they must continually prove their greatness to others by creating things with their minds. So they've decided on the spectacular and spectacularly stupid act of resurrecting a dead god. That's where the Athar come in. The Athar are dedicated to erasing the gods from the multiverse, and dead ones are jam-dandy to their folk. Less gods to get in people's way, after all. Bringing one back is heinous and a violent challenge to the most fundamental part of Athar beliefs. The signers' selfishness has created a whole host of challenges and easy places to start conflict for a campaign, especially since the signers are thinking about bringing back the dead god Eoskar. Eoskar was the god of portals, and he enjoyed such massive popularity in Sigil, even the Daebus began to worship him. Naturally, the Lady of Pain didn't like that, so she destroyed Eoskar in the blink of an eye, and that was that. Laws have been on Sigil's books for millennia, thousands of years, forbidding anyone to worship Eoskar. If the signers try to bring him back, that could lead to apocalyptic carnage and even the destruction of Sigil itself. It has all the makings of a perfect campaign. No classes are forbidden from joining. Lawful characters like monks and paladins may find it difficult to exist in such a selfish faction. Lawful PCs tend to believe in an overriding meaning or structure to the universe that they take their place in. Following the commands of others and determining your place in a hierarchy doesn't mesh well with the egotistical notion that you craft the land around you and that you're the center of the universe. Paladins in particular will find it difficult to peaceably sit down and hear a Beatazu's perspective on the world. Freewheeling rogues, rangers, or bards all get along well in the faction. Wizards and sorcerers use thoughts and concentration to make magic. Seems precisely what the signers believe in about thought leading to seemingly impossible effects on reality. The plentiful wizards make crossing the sign of one a dangerous prospect. Also, the spell-slinging signers are exceptional designers of new spells, so creating your own unique spells under applicable game rules is entirely acceptable. Naturally, anyone using psionic powers are natural signers. They are even better equipped than mages in using their thoughts to bend the world to their will. Their ability to focus and concentrate is obviously going to be useful as their role as a signer. Clerics in particular may find it difficult to accommodate the faction. You see, being a cleric involves subordinating yourself to a deity. The signers in some way agree with the Athar about the gods, in that they are not uniquely special or wonderful creatures beyond our ken. The Sign of One believes the gods are mere creations of the individual, and as such mortals created them, not the other way around. And the gods' existence and power are not so much reflections of deific might, but rather proof of the extraordinary strength of the mundane creatures' minds when bent towards a single goal in unison. This may be seen by some religious people as base arrogance, blaspheming against the might of the deity by turning the source of power from him to the people. But the existence of deities in advanced Dungeons & Dragons and Planescape in particular suggests that the gods are heavily empowered by faith from their flocks. In some ways, the signers mesh perfectly with the clerical ideal of faith, so a cleric may choose to see the sign as an extraordinary way to spread the concept of faith. By visceral example that the power of thought can affect the future, a priest may encourage others to embrace a faith-filled life.
I told them about the doctor. I love him. And I told them to pass it on. To spread the word so that everyone would know about the doctor.
Faith and hope. Is that all?
No, because I gave them an instruction. Just as the doctor said.
Use the countdown.
I told them that if everyone thinks of one word at one specific time...
nothing will happen. Is that your weapon? Prayer.
Right across the world, one word, just one thought at one moment, but with 15 satellites.
What? The Archangel Network?
A telepathic field, binding the whole human race together with all of them, every single person on Earth thinking the same thing at the same time, and that word is Doctor.
No, you don't. Doctor. Stop this right now. Stop it!
Doctor.
I've had a whole year to tune myself into the psychic network and integrate with its matrices. I order you to stop! One thing you can't do. Stop them thinking.
Your average follower of the Sign of One has a number of difficulties with their self-centered attitude. One is that the faction itself is lacking in sympathy for other distressed members. Should a factioneer find herself in extremis, she won't get a lot of help from her co-believers. Shouldn't she just imagine herself out of trouble would likely be the response. See, if you get into trouble that you can't get out of, it seems like you don't really believe hard enough in the power of belief, or just haven't tried your best. Looking out for number one is a given, so don't expect any hideout flats or special favors. Self-absorption gives the signers a penalty to all NPC reactions and loyalty checks. Expect your signer companion to step on a lot of toes and rub people the wrong way. She's usually too lost in her own dreamy world to care about other people's feelings too much. Yet she will compensate for this with excellent training in perform, diplomacy, and other speech-related skills that signers prize. The signers take pride in their doctrinal skill at hearing other perspectives. The signers also have a bonus when it comes to discernment of illusions. Because they spend so much time imagining things, they have a permanent bonus seeing through glamours and other false images. The signers also have the unpredictable factional ability to create something from nothing. The upshot of which is you can mimic any spell up to 4th level once per day, even if you aren't a magic user. But beware, if you roll a natural 1 on this ability, you will yourself out of existence and need a remove curse or similar spell to restore yourself. Higher level signers can even mimic spells up to the maximum level of 9, thus potentially using such powerful spells as Weird, Wish, or Storm of Vengeance. I couldn't find if arcane spell failure is still a factor in this, but I would suggest it is not because it's a spell-like ability, making this easily the most powerful faction-specific ability in all of Planescape. Beware though if you try and create a spell of level 5 to 9, because if you critically fail on a roll of 1, you will instantly be willed out of existence and die permanently, requiring a true resurrection spell to restore yourself. The signers can be rude and narcissistic, but you can choose to make them clueless and good at heart, or genuinely nasty and apathetic about those around them. Some of the signers are really trying to use their factional abilities and skills in order to make the world a better place. Some of the signers ridiculously want to fill the entire universe with the smell of roses. Why? Who knows? They're crazy. Some of them believe that their power should be used to just make things better and help people by showing them how good positive thinking can make their lives and the world around them. Racially, the signers are wonderfully diverse, with demons, devils, humans, elves, angels, Githzerai, everything, all side by side. There's really no dominant group, as diversity is an inherent part of the faction. Everyone's views are all equally good and correct, and the signers won't try to force their views on others. See, the signers are a faction that does not actively recruit. To possess the will of one, you have to be somewhat unique, tied into the ability to train and use your mind for shaping the universe. And you have to prove yourself capable in order to be accepted. And you'll be given snobby dismissals by the high-ups if you have a meager number of correct predictions. The signers are the anti-harmonium. The sign of one necessitates millions and millions of unique viewpoints. There is no bending or forcing to a single worldview. The diversity of the sign of one is a wondrous tool to receive knowledge. The signers can train you to see every side, know every bit of info, and constantly hone and realign your vision based on new information. Of all the factions, the sign of one is the most open towards other factions existing, and improving the fecundity of information gathering and transmitting. They haven't met an idea that they would dismiss, and they're willing to hear everything. So ultimately, what do I think of the signers? Well, I think they're barmy, that's what I think. They sound pretty crazy to me. And a lot of their real-world basis for what they believe just seems so obtuse and difficult to understand, or just outright crazy. But if I were to put aside my bleaker arrogance and hatred of these guys, I have to admit that their self-centeredness aside, a signer character is one of the most creative and neutral characters you can find. They're not going to be beholden to any one idea or thought, and they're going to be trying to see every kind of perspective. And sometimes the only way to solve a problem is by going beyond into diversity what you would normally choose to think is right. They also seem like they would be great debaters and serve as a mouthpiece for the party who are trying to get out of certain difficult situations. All in all, the signers are going to be a really fascinating group with a very complicated philosophical belief system that it's really exciting to kind of study and get interested in. And it's going to lead you to more philosophical places, I think, than a lot of other factions will. And their faction beliefs are just very strongly related to Planescape and the concept of the Outer Planes, a place where people can shape things with their thoughts. It makes perfect sense there. And all in all, I think that their belief system can be really exciting, especially as a foil to your characters. They can really work with their bizarre, arrogant dreams to resurrect a god. All in all, the signers are really, really interesting and worth studying, if not, even if I think they're a bit crazy.
Is in the world of quantum possibility, in the soup, the nebulous soup of all possibilities, what we're doing is we're isolating, we're locking one into place. And if we're not specific about what that possibility is, then how can the field be specific about what it is that it gives to us?